These extraordinary sculptures were created from flesh and bone by a little-known genius of the 18th century, a Frenchman by the name of Jean-Honore Fragonard. The people Fragonard preserved were all once alive. They all had families. They all had a first name and a last name. But today they are simply icons dressed in ribbons of flesh. The man with the jawbone of an ass, Fragonard's horseman. But who Fragonard was, and what led him to create these extraordinary sculptures, is a little-known story. Jean-Honore Fragonard was born into a family of artists in 1732. They lived in Grasse, in Provence, in perfume country. They had a large garden with orange trees and jasmine, and a little house in the fields where his parents distilled flowers into fragrance. Today the name Fragonard is associated with his cousin the artist, Jean-Honore Fragonard. His most famous painting, The Swing, was adored during his lifetime and is still popular today. He also grew up in the romantic floral surroundings of Grasse and had a reputation for the way he depicted the diaphanous silky skin of his young models. Fragonard the anatomist drew on his father's skills as a craftsman. As well as making perfume, the family kept goats and kids, and his father sewed their leather into elegant gloves. From early childhood, Jean-Honore was familiar with the delicate art of skinning animals. In 1750, Fragonard's father died. Jean-Honore was 18 and was sent to Lyon to train as a surgeon. When he qualified, Fragonard began working with the head of the Equestrian Academy of Lyon, a passionate horseman called Claude Bourgelat. Bourgelat earned international acclaim with the many books he published on horsemanship and equine medicine. He became so famous that Frederick the Great, King of Prussia, is said to have consulted him to find out if it was preferable for the cavalry to charge at a trot or a gallop. To keep his books accurate and his reputation intact, Bourgelat needed to dissect horses, and it was with this that he sought Fragonard's help. In one book, Bourgelat proposed the founding of schools for equine medicine, and in 1762, in Lyon, he set up the first veterinary school in Europe. From the beginning, Fragonard worked alongside Bourgelat as surgeon and teacher. But before long, Bourgelat had become his arch-enemy. In 1766, Bourgelat opened a second veterinary school at Alfort, near Paris, and Fragonard was made its director. Here they taught the medical treatment and anatomy of domestic animals and horses. One rare handwritten trace of Fragonard has survived from the Alfort school. It is an account of expenditure for the first year.
2 buckets, 1 bellows, 1½ dozen dishes, 1 salt cellar, 2 plates, 1 chamber pot, 1 water pitcher and basin, 6 glasses. 1 table, 12 chairs and an easel. 4 scalpel cases and 4 dissecting knives. 1 ox head. Purchase of 8 horses at 3 francs each. For 1 monkey, 2 francs and 5 sous. 1 human subject, 21 francs. 1 human subject, 3 francs. 1 human subject, 3 francs and 4 sous.
Fragonard's name is mentioned in a number of documents at the veterinary school, but we have no idea what he actually looked like. All the directors who came after him have their portraits displayed here, but not Fragonard. It is as if someone had been hell-bent on removing all traces of his presence. In those days, the people of Paris found anatomy violently distasteful, and classed anatomists with the knackers, who slaughtered and quartered old horses.
Il y avait tout un trafic avec les garçons de la faculté qui était tout de même un prolétariat très mal payé. Qu'est-ce qu'on faisait les restes? Alors là, on jetait ça dans la rue. Et alors tous les propriétaires autour de là où nous sommes, oui, les loyers, effectivement, ne pouvaient pas être exigés, vu la nuisance que ça représentait.
In the 18th century, many of the bodies used for dissection belonged to criminals. The belief was that any villain would be more useful to society stretched out in an anatomy theatre than hanging from the gallows. This is Smugglerius, a man who was executed in London in 1775 for smuggling. After he was hanged, his body was taken to the surgeon's headquarters for public dissection by the eminent anatomist William Hunter. But when he began removing the skin, Hunter decided that the body was worth preserving. While he was still warm, Smugglerius was transferred to the Royal Academy, where the sculptor Carlini posed him as a dying gladiator. Down the years, artists have been just as interested in detailed anatomy as doctors. Most famously, Michelangelo dissected people in order to teach himself how to represent their bodies. In 1801, the president of the Royal Academy in London fell into an argument with friends over whether Michelangelo's crucifixions were anatomically correct. To settle the debate, they commissioned a dissection of their own. This is the man they chose. His name was James Legge. He was a patient at the Chelsea Military Hospital who murdered one of his barracks mates on October the 2nd, 1801. He was hanged and crucified, and later skinned to prove their artistic point. Around 1800, in England, people tried to abolish the law that all murderers should be dissected. But the authorities opposed hanging without dissection because they believed it would not be sufficiently dissuasive. It was while Fragonard worked as director of the veterinary school that he created his masterpieces.
Là, on voit bien les tendons de muscles fléchisseurs superficiels et profonds des phalanges.
As well as the skinned figures, Fragonard preserved hundreds of human and animal teaching pieces, which are still held at the Alfort Veterinary School today.
Le fléchisseur profond qui traverse le fléchisseur superficiel. Donc il y a une sorte de gauche au départ de la deuxième phalange et l'autre qui va jusqu'à la troisième phalange. Donc le mouvement qu'ils permettent est différent.
Et ils agissent pas forcément ensemble toujours?
Ça dépend. Chez certains individus, ils arrivent à sélectionner uniquement le fléchisseur profond et donc à fléchir uniquement la troisième phalange sur la seconde. Moi, j'y arrive pas. Ça se retourne de son erreur. Dire zut, et puis hop, il recommence. Et le trait de scie reste depuis 220 ans. Je trouve que ça humanise beaucoup la pièce. Ce que je trouve impressionnant, c'est que d'habitude, on fait des dissections sur un bout de membre. Et là, il y a
quelque chose d'extraordinaire.
L'ensemble du corps, il y a tous les plans superficiels profonds. En plus, il fait à la fois le système nerveux, l'appareil vasculaire. Il y a tout, quoi.
Moi, je me rappelle quand Breton, c'est Breton qui m'a envoyé voir le cavalier de Fragonard. Je sais pas, il fallait prendre rendez-vous à l'époque pour aller le voir et tout. Je suis tombé raide, mais ça n'avait rien de morbide et tout. Ah, on voit bien Fragonard, il essaye de nous faire approcher au plus près de la sensibilité de l'âme. Enfin, c'était un type formidable. Je veux dire qu'il n'y avait rien de morbide, on n'est pas dans Frankenstein ou machin.
And Samson found the jawbone of an ass, and put forth his hand and took it. And Samson said, With the jawbone of an ass I have slain 1,000 men.
The human identity of Fragonard's Samson has been lost in the mists of time. No one knows if he was a criminal or just a pauper. But mystery surrounding the identity of the horseman plagued Fragonard in his later years.
Non, il travaillait en fait voilà, tout seul et toujours au nord, parce qu'il faisait plus froid au nord et en hiver.
Est-ce qu'on l'aimait bien?
Au début oui, mais après il ne s'entendait pas du tout bien avec son directeur, qui était...
Il a fait passer pour un fou.
Voilà, Bourgelat.
Ils ont découpé son ventre là.
Comme Bourgelat l'a fait passer pour fou, il n'était pas tellement aimé.
By 1771, Fragonard's old mentor, Claude Bourgelat, had become a leading authority in the field of equine medicine. His reputation was based on the systematic anatomical investigations he had published in his book, Précis anatomique du corps du cheval. But when this book was reprinted in later years, the veterinary expert who wrote the preface made a surprising point. He said people should not ignore the fact that, along with Bourgelat, the distinguished anatomist Jean-Honore Fragonard had done most of the dissections upon which the book was based. While Fragonard had been running the veterinary school and creating his strange masterpieces, Bourgelat had assumed the powerful role of overseer of the royal stud. There, Bourgelat heard disturbing rumors about the identity of the skinned horseman. When Fragonard first presented the horseman, he held reins made of blue satin, and rumours began that the body in fact belonged to a woman with whom Fragonard had been in love. They said she was the daughter of a greengrocer in Alfort, and that when her parents refused to let her marry Fragonard, she had died of a broken heart. He was then said to have unearthed her from her grave. And whenever visitors asked him about the horseman, Fragonard was overcome with sadness. In the face of these rumours, Bourgelat decided that Fragonard must be removed from the veterinary school. He wrote to the patron, Minister Bertin.
The poor man is unquestionably mad, in the full sense of the term, and everything he has done for the last 8 days is proof of that. I ask your lordship to have pity on a poor man who has lost his head.
Fragonard was dismissed as head of the Royal Veterinary School. Later, the horseman was examined and found to be a man after all. But Fragonard did not get his job back. We will never know whether he was truly deranged, or if Bourgelat simply envied his success. In 1776, Fragonard invested his capital in a life annuity.
Et puis vous avez des organismes tout à fait officiels, puisque vous avez la Caisse nationale d'épargne, où vous allez avec votre argent, et puis vous faites un chèque, et puis vous aliénez donc un capital, et on vous redonne une rente jusqu'à la fin de vos jours.
Fragonard lived so long that this should have been a good investment. But unfortunately, the man with whom he did business was a swindler. Fragonard lost all his capital and never received any annuity whatsoever. For the next 12 years, Fragonard's existence is clouded by obscurity. He is thought to have earned a living making anatomical pieces for a certain class of French intellectual who collected natural history artifacts. It is a tradition that continues today.
On n'est pas du tout obligé d'être croyant pour cela, mais c'est les objets de vanité, au fait, font penser, c'est pas la mort qui va suivre, c'est autre chose, c'est une forme d'éternité. J'appelle ça ma maladie, c'est une drôle de chose comme ça, mais c'est comme ça. C'est plus fort que son âme.
In Fragonard's time, these collections gave the rational man a way of ordering the world. They were a condensed version of the marvellous range of scientific and technical knowledge of the day.
Une nature morte que j'ai construite avec tout ce qui rappelle la caducité, la mort, mais qui veut encore survivre avec le crâne qui est gravé, c'est un crâne de New Brittany, avec le couteau qui regarde ce qui va devenir, avec le Maori qui est tatoué, qui veut encore survivre, avec la force, avec le léopard, avec la montre astronomique, les objets, les fleurs qui vont périr, qui sont aussi une forme de caducité. Ici, il faudrait encore une bougie parce que c'est aussi la caducité.
While Fragonard was supplementing the collections of French intellectuals, the study of anatomy was undergoing radical change. The philosopher Diderot published a controversial encyclopedia which remains famous even today. In it he declared a belief that was the force behind the contemporary study of anatomy. He said that if the man who knows a clock the best can repair it the best, then in the same way, the man who has the greatest understanding of the human body will be the most successful at eradicating illness. The best anatomist should make the best doctor. To surgeons of the time, anatomy was vital. With no anesthetics available, the surgeons who knew the body best and who thus worked the fastest were the most successful. And while medical students no longer studied the anatomy of the healthy body, they had come to perceive all illness as nothing more than the symptoms of how an organ gradually wears down and dies. On the eve of the French Revolution, private anatomy courses were widespread, and everyone with a scalpel loved to work in Paris. In his book Tableau de Paris, Louis-Sébastien Mercier wrote,
"Dead bodies abound and are very cheap. The head anatomist buys these bodies at 10 or 12 francs and sells them to his students for twice that price. In this way, after the death of the poor man, his body is stolen from him once again."
In 1795, the revolution brought liberty to the people of France. There was an atmosphere of change that encouraged scientists to fulfill their medical dreams. And for the first time in 12 years, Fragonard's name reappears in official documents. He put forward a proposal for a new national institution. During the revolution, many large and beautiful church properties had been confiscated by the state, and Fragonard suggested that one of these would be the perfect home for the anatomical collection he proposed. It was the Dome of the Assumption, which is today the Polish Church of Paris. This majestic temple, he said, will bear witness to future peoples that liberty, still in its infancy, knew how to honor science and the arts.
Dans lequel ils eussent pu faire toutes les expériences nécessaires pour constater ou pour pousser plus loin les découvertes utiles à l'humanité souffrante. Dans lequel les professeurs nationaux eussent pu conduire leurs élèves et leur faire pénétrer les derniers replis du corps de l'animal. Et surtout pendant la saison des chaleurs, lorsque les dissections et par conséquent les cours d'anatomie sont absolument impraticables.
Fragonard dreamed of a collection of 10,000 anatomical figures that would draw scientists and visitors from all over the world. He had planned it all in detail. Downstairs would be an amphitheatre, and on the first floor a laboratory and the collection. The two small wings of the dome would provide lodging for Fragonard, his two collaborators, a floor polisher and a hired hand. Once complete, the collection would represent considerable capital, and Fragonard planned that every 5 or 6 years it would be sold and replaced with new pieces. By doing this, he said, the enterprise could be profitable as well as scientific.
Emploi des 20 000 livres accordés par la nation, Monsieur Fragonard, directeur, 2400 livres. Il n'est pas nécessaire de dire qu'il faut que les chefs de cabinet d'anatomie soient autorisés à choisir dans les hôpitaux les sujets qui leur seront utiles. Signé Fragonard, Delzeuse et Landrieux.
But after the revolution, traditions for conserving human remains began to weaken. Instead, Fragonard was put in charge of the great private anatomy collections around the country, many of which he had contributed to himself. During the upheaval of the Revolution, whole cemeteries were moved, and Fragonard the anatomist was put in charge of the strange mummified bodies of the Capuchin friars of Toulouse. The friars were an order of Franciscan monks who had discovered the secret of human embalming in Sicily more than 200 years before. In Sicily, their bodies can still be seen today.
Nel 1534 vennero i frati cappuccini qua. Quindi allora scavarono là in fondo e là in fondo trovarono che c'era un salone chiuso. Hanno rotto e hanno visto là dentro 45 frati da 45 anni che erano morti e sembravano morti di pochi giorni. E allora pensarono alcuni frati di conservarli e cominciarono a fare questo qua, tutto questo corridoio.
Qual è il segreto per farli?
Sì, hai il segreto è lungo, non è...
La ricetta della cucina, come se lei dovesse fare la cucina mi dovesse dire la ricetta per fare un piatto, come si fa a fare una mummia?
Che si scava, quando si fa... sto dicendo questo io, sto dicendo questo. Allora presero i frati, l'hanno pulito, no, svenzato, messo nei coladoi e che scolavano per un 8-10 mesi e poi li mettevano al sole, li prendevano, li mettevano al sole fino a che si asciugavano, poi le calavano anche nell'assenio o nella cacciaviva oppure messe al sole soltanto, poi le rivestivano con le vesti e li appendevano là. Che facevano grande penitenza per loro, per i suoi peccati e anche per gli altri, per penitenza, per i bisogni della città di Palermo. Ecco, tutto. E poi ci sono, la storia è anche lunga, è giusto. Ecco, io ho terminato.
Fragonard was employed to study the mummies of the Capuchin monastery and to find out how the monks preserved them. It was hoped that they be added to the collection of Egyptian mummies in the newly founded National Museum of Natural History. But it was not to be.
Bene, e allora?
Fragonard died in 1799. He was himself then dissected. The surgeon who performed the dissection found malignant tumours in Fragonard's intestine, his stomach and his liver. Fragonard's life ended as it had been lived, honest but obscure. But though he has been forgotten, the horseman and his other strange masterpieces live on.
L'homme est malade parce qu'il est mal construit. Il faut se décider à le mettre à nu pour lui gâter cet animalcule qui le démange mortellement. Dieu, et avec Dieu, ses organes, oui, ses organes, tous ses organes, car, suivez-moi si vous le voulez, Et il n'y a rien de plus inutile qu'un organe. Lorsque vous lui aurez fait un corps sans organe, alors vous l'aurez délivré de tous les automatismes et rendu à sa véritable et immortelle liberté.